What do you, if I said culture to you, what would you think about that? If I said culture, I'm just going to share a slide here as well. So what I'm sharing here is, this is on the right there, that's myself and my wife. Now, my wife is not Indian, she's Chinese. That is my daughter there, who is had an Indian wedding there a little while ago, and her husband, strapping young man, just there. And that is one type of culture. Now, I'm not talking about that type of culture. I'm talking about team culture, actually organizational culture. Organizational culture is much, much more difficult. And what we're going to take a look at today is what happened and how we go about that. Now, the difference between a private sector and a government sector, I'm actually coming to you from Wellington, New Zealand. And in Wellington, New Zealand, that building on the right there is our government offices. It's called the Beehive for reasonably obvious reasons. It looks like one. But what we're looking at is these differences. Now, when you go through and take a look at the differences between government and private, in the private industry, it's reasonably easy to be the person who comes in and assists. And I'm not talking about command and control, I'm talking about culture. But within a private industry, you can go in and ask the team to do something with a reasonable expectation that the team would at least give it a try or even feed back to you. In a government organization here, the team, if you ask the team to do something, that would be one of the reasons why they may not give it a try, is because they've been asked to do it. But if they have the enthusiasm to do something, and if they think it's their idea, then nothing's going to stop them. So it's a different way of looking at it, if you like. In a private organization, teams are more open to new ideas. They can understand things and they can look it through and work it through. And again, I say it's not command and control. You're not going through and saying, do this, do that. You're talking to teams and saying, how about we give this a try? How about we give that a try? Have you ever done this? Has anybody else had any suggestions? It's not command and control, it's culture is what I'm talking about. So let's start with, first of all, I want to introduce somebody to you, and that's this guy here called Chris Buxton. Now, Chris Buxton is the CIO, actually the CDO, Chief Digital Officer for Stats NZ. Now, when I was there, I think he's still there, and he's changed the IT department to digital business system. He went in there with a digital outlook. He didn't want to necessarily be the IT, because IT assumes it's all about hardware. And he wanted to change that. No, it's all about business. It's all about digital, all that sort of thing. So he changed that was very, very interesting what he did there. He changed his title from CIO to CDO. Now, back in those days, CDO was considered not as powerful as CIO. So that change could have gone the wrong way. It turned out to be a very good way to go. But he removed that hierarchy that was in there and at the time, and the old school way of looking at things, the old government organization way of looking at things. He changed that hierarchy, and he started that awareness about Agile and DevOps. But then something happened. As you've been told there, at a 7.8 earthquake around midnight happened in New Zealand. Now that was fantastic. I don't know if you can see it on here, but there's a couple of people standing up here. That's actual people's height. You can see on that picture there. That crack went for over 100 miles. New Zealand stood, parts of New Zealand stood, 24 feet higher, walked about 15 feet further north. So it was quite dramatic. Places that were under sea were suddenly now part of New Zealand. New Zealand changed its shape in that particular point. What happened was that we get earthquakes here reasonably often. It's nothing to write home about. It's fairly straightforward. We get it all the time. What happened at midnight was my wife and I were sitting up in bed, reading and chatting, and then suddenly this earthquake started. We looked at each other and said, "Oh, there's an earthquake. Did you feel that?" Next thing you know is, "Oh, it's quite a strong one." And from that point onwards, all we could do was hang on to the side of the bed. Nothing more we could do. We couldn't stand up. We couldn't do anything. And that's what's happened. And that was hundreds of miles away from the epicenter. So it was quite dramatic. Let's put it this way. We had, in the place we were living in at that stage, we had a swimming pool. The water in the swimming pool splashed onto the side of the house. It was that dramatic. So, so quite something. Okay. Now, Statistics House. Statistics House is where the Department of Statistics is, or Statistics New Zealand as they're called. And they lost that 90% of IT capability overnight. Now, when you think about it, you know, just how many organizations would survive that? 90%, I would suggest possibly even more. Nobody could get back into that building. That building was pretty much flattened. Nobody was allowed to even walk through. It's but what happened was that entire organization just dropped everything and got things done. So within 5 days, the core productivity was recreated. Within 12 weeks, we had full restoration of everything. Even though we couldn't get to the servers, even though we couldn't get to, you couldn't even walk in and get the jacket you left over the back of your chair. There was nothing. In the end, that entire building was eaten up by one of these machines that just simply gobbled things up and chucked them out as rubbish. So it was quite a scary situation to be in. But at what cost? People just did everything necessary. What did this create? And that's what we're getting into. So here's taking a look at this. This is what happened to Statistics House. Now, if you take a look on the left here, it's a little bit skewed to the side, but they had one of these videos underneath one of these helicopter little thingies that they flew through. And that on the left is the left of that green one there is the wall, and on the right of that green one there, that's the story above. There's the floor from the story above, just fell through. So if you take a look at what's happening there, I think that's that area on the right hand side there. That's up to the side. That's part of a wall or part of a floor coming down from above again, and it was just a wreck. It was too unstable to even go in and get your telephone you left on the desk, nothing. So not your computers, nothing. There were a number of projects that they was just moving towards Agile at that stage. So there was a number of project rooms with sticky notes everywhere. And they had to start again because they hadn't actually put those sticky notes into anything that they could keep. It was all there. So they were just wiped out. So what happened at that particular point? That's 300 kilometers away, by the way. That's about, what's that? Well, over a couple of 100 miles, perhaps. So actually, that was just one house. Wellington Central had many like that. That's just one department. So what will happen? Heroes. Now, there is a problem with heroes. While they're wonderful and they can get things off the ground, as I said, they were actually up and running again within a very short time and full capability within 12 weeks. It was just tremendous. But there's a problem with heroes, and the heroes work individually. Heroes make decisions on the spot. Heroes don't consult on their decisions. Suddenly just somebody comes in and says, here's your new system. This is what we've done. Start working on it, give some feedback. So heroes form their own hierarchy of power, if you like, within what they do. Now that's not putting them down. This is a whole organization full of heroes, people who actually did everything. If you went in there probably on a Sunday afternoon, you might find half the organization, this is a government organization, half of them there at work, actually trying to get things up and running again. The tremendous effort by everybody was fabulous. So, but that's when I came in. So when I arrived, we were looking at 9 DevOps teams and 3 very high profile projects on the way. And the problem was, as I said before, it is the culture. Trying to get around that culture is very, very difficult. And at this stage, it was that culture of we've been there, we've done that, and it worked. You know, we were able to do this now, it worked, so why should we change? And that is a problem. You get that difficulty of trying to get people to take a look at something new. Now, I was the only coach in that whole organization, that whole government department. And we had 3 offices through New Zealand, and I was asked to come up or organize the whole organization through to being agile. So what do we get? We get a different culture. When I say culture, by the way, there is that old government culture that you hear about and you see in perhaps some of the old movies where no work is done, you know, and everybody goes on to morning tea at 9 o'clock and then comes back at 3 p.m. It's not that type of culture. This government department was excellent. It had that protectors of people and protectors of things. They didn't want to let anybody else in. Let's give you an example. I came in on my first day, and the CDO and the person that I report to underneath the CDO was bringing everybody in the organization together to meet Steve Peacocke. And who turned up? Nobody. So a meeting was called to introduce me and let them know, you know, that I was there to help. Not one single person turned up. That was the culture. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, many, many reasons. One of them is this thing called confirmation bias. Now, confirmation bias says, oh, Agile, I know what that is. We're already doing it. That sort of idea. The other one is that a backfire type of bias. Now, backfire bias means that if you ask somebody to do something and they believe something else, they will believe that something else more strongly now because you've asked them to take a look at something different. So it's an awkward one. And then you've got something called imposter syndrome, where people come along to work and they've been told how good they are, and they've been told they're an expert in their own particular area. And if somebody else comes in, they feel that they will find out that all they're doing is their normal everyday work. And they're not really an expert, when in fact, actually, that very fact that they feel that they can do their work readily means that they now are an expert in what they're doing. So it's a different biases that we have in there. And one of the biggest problems was that when I came in, you know, I've been doing organizational change in different organizations for many, many years, for almost 30 years now. And the problem that I found in this one is that nobody needed to listen to me. I didn't have a position of power. I didn't have any specific title apart from consultant. I didn't have anything in there that says anybody had to listen to me at all. So if I walked into a team and said, hi, I'm Steve, I'm here as an Agile coach, how are you going? That would be the reason to actually turn away and not want me at all. So it was an extremely difficult situation to walk into, and I hadn't had that before. The only thing I had was influence. So I was out of my depth totally. You know, my first theory, right, we'll get everybody going and have a look around. It's going to take more than the day. It's just, you know, what do you do here? It's a very, very difficult situation. Influence without being able to have anybody even listening to me was going to be difficult. I went out and I tried to talk to people, find out what their concerns were. I wanted to listen to them, but of course they felt that I was there to change their lives. And it's not until I told them that, and that's what somebody jumped up one time and says, no, you're trying to change the way we work. And my answer was, no, I'm not. I'm here to show you a few things, to talk to you, but I can't change the way you work. Only you can do that. And that's only if you decide to. And that sort of put it down for a little while and said, okay, well, let's listen to this guy. So it was a very difficult time for me. I would say it took me probably a month to 6 weeks to go from nobody wanting to be anywhere near me because I was there to change their work, through to, hey, he's actually quite a nice guy. We can talk to him. We can have a cup of coffee with him. So it went from there. After a while from there, took about another couple of months to them to realize, hey, I actually know what I'm talking about. We can bounce ideas off them, and this guy's not going to suddenly shove it back down our throats again. And if we bounce an idea and it's not the correct one, he's not going to correct us for it. He's just going to talk to us. So they started pulling me aside and saying, what do you think of this and what do you think of that, which is kind of great, marvelous. But I also had other problems as a coach. I would go around to teams and say, hi, can I see your board? Oh, we don't do a board. Well, can I see your burn down chart? Oh, we don't do a burn down chart. But you told us you were operating in a Scrum environment. So what is your cadence? Oh, we don't do cadence. So how many weeks do you do for your iteration? Oh, we don't do that. So what makes you Scrum? Oh, we've all been trained in Scrum. So it's a very difficult situation. You get that. And when I started talking specifically about, why don't we do iterations? They got started working on iterations on their own. And some of the teams started working in iterations or sprints because another team started working in sprints. They had the title DevOps team, so they felt that meant that they were a DevOps team. And understood DevOps. Now, I wasn't there to implement DevOps. I was there to implement Agile, which is the first step towards it. So I was there, and that was going to take me all the time that I had, a good couple of years to do. But their idea was that they felt they already know. Some of them had Scrum training, and when I found out when that was more than 10 years previously. So, and they felt they'd been using it ever since, but they hadn't. So it was an interesting situation. These are great people. They're tremendous. The amount of knowledge in there is fantastic. And just to watch these people work is tremendous. And I really enjoyed a lot of them. But I was totally out of my depth to implement anything within there. It just wasn't going to happen. So I want to talk to you about 8 different learnings that I had as a coach. Now, remember, I've always been in a position of power, development manager, CIO, COO, all of these sort of areas as ability to implement change. I was learning new things all the way through. So there's 8 lessons that I learned. The first one was people need to be on the same page. So I went to the CIO and I said, hey, what if I trained these people? And he was, oh, cool, that's fine. Turned around and said, oh, we're going to need a trainer and they cost fortune. Did you realize, of course, that I am a certified trainer? So no problems. So I was able to take all the teams through Agile training with IC Agile and give them an idea of what it is that we're talking about when we start talking Agile. Because with, what is it, about 100 people, I would ask there, what does Agile mean? I would probably get 120 answers, different answers. So they all knew what it meant, but they all knew differently. So the first thing to do is put them on the same page, that if we're having a conversation, we all know what that conversation is actually about. So the training happened. Now, the training also had a better side effect, is that it also realized with a lot of people, hey, you know, Steve actually knows what he's talking about. Steve has done this. Steve has got a bit of experience behind him with all these other companies as well. So I had an input into that. I had a bit of a change. And what that change happened was the conversations around the office changed. There were starting to get a few agile meetings actually happening there. You know, they came away a little bit more inspired on what they can do. So the agile meetings started to happening. You know, you walk around the office for 2 weeks and you'd never see anybody having anything but the old style, you know, 3-hour-long project meeting. But suddenly you walk around the office and there's people there having retrospectives. There's people having stand-ups. There's people having you know, just normal get-together meetings that are your normal agile meetings, going through, finding out what they're going to be planning for the next sprint, etc. So the conversation changed. The word sprint came into it. They still didn't want to do burn downs, and I asked them why. And their response was that management would compare their burn down with somebody else's, or would look at them and tell them off for a burn down. And that puzzled me. So I said, why would they do that? They said, oh, they don't understand what a burn down is. So isn't that your job to let them know what they're looking at? Oh, no. So they wouldn't take action on that. So I had a talk with the CIO, and he told me about I think the old management style in there was very much jump on anything and started yelling at people. So, and that had gone for at least a few years before I had arrived. Those people had moved on, totally different management style in there, but the old fears were still the same. So trying to get them to change, that was difficult, but eventually that took 2 years, most of it, to actually get to the stage where they were open with anybody wandering past. It's quite good. So as I said there, teams are inspired to try. So things were happening. So number 2 is another one is my lesson. Is another one of my sort of theories of what I had to do, because I keep beating myself up about these people here, or this person or that person is always going to turn away from me because I'm going to change their job, is what they're thinking I'm doing. And it wasn't until somebody actually took me aside, and I have some very, very good coach friends who are organizing in somewhere else, that I sit and have a cup of coffee with at least once a week. And one of them actually said to me and said, you know, not everybody's going to get on your wagon. Not everybody's going to understand. And as soon as you accept that, you can move on. And that was a very hard lesson for me, because I don't like to leave anybody behind. You know, I've been into organizations where people in teams go from absolutely, I keep saying this all the time, absolutely dreading coming to work on Mondays and spend the entire work looking forward to Fridays, to 3 to 6 months later, going home to tell their parents and their family and everybody else what fantastic work they're doing. At work, and looking forward to joining the best team in the world on Monday. So I liked everybody to come along. I thought this was great, but I had to accept it. Some people won't. It's a very, very difficult situation there. That's the idea. As my friend said to me, it's not your problem that they won't. Don't take it on your shoulders. It is their problem that they won't. So once I'd accepted that, things became a little bit easier. And what I actually found was that I couldn't change those people. There's no way that I could change those people, because I was perceived as being a person in power. And it wasn't me that was going to change that. It was the team that changed that for them. So it's the team. It's a matter of trust. They don't trust people. Some people will never, ever trust a person in power, but they will trust their teammates. So that's what happened. They came along with their teams and made that change. Number three, what I had to do was I had to find out what their problems were, what was happening. I knew they were having troubles. I knew what was happening there. They were all struggling and they were all swearing at their project teams, and the control from the project teams was immense. And I tried to figure out, well, what do I need to look at here? What do I need to attack? How can I help them? And it was a very, very difficult one to find out what was happening. Without any reports, nobody would give me a report. And I found out later that the reason why is because nobody made any reports or did anything. So they didn't even do their own burn downs, even quietly. They just simply didn't do reporting. That's it. They weren't open to that. So without access to anything like that, I had Atlassian's Jira, they all use. So I took a look at that as the only way to find out what was actually happening. And what was happening really surprised me. It surprised me so much that I never even thought about it at the beginning. When you took a look at the process going through an edge for a team to build something, it was more like something like that. Whereas those red pieces there are where the team gets involved. All the rest of it is the project work and doing the project things. So you'd get teams working away on doing something and then suddenly look at what's their next thing to do, and it would be changed to something different. They didn't control their own project areas. There was a problem. And the other problem was that the project people acted in the old style way of they went out and got their team. Now they got a team. So that team is now working for them. It's their team and they feel it's their team. And the CIO was very adamant about that. No, it's not their team. It belongs to DBS. It's our team. So we had a look at a few things there. So my challenges were, I had to drag this team, each of those teams, kicking and screaming back into DBS. I had to get them to use their own boards. I'll explain that a little later. But what happened was that what I did was I went along and I spoke to both the team managers or the Scrum Masters and the project people, which were usually in a different office. So I was flying backwards and forwards quite a bit. And what I found was that they were actually all open to the teams doing their own work and then not being necessarily out of it. Yes, there were some very difficult people who didn't not want to let go of control. It was their team after all. And it wasn't until I expressed that, no, actually, they're not your team. They belong to DBS. So we've assigned the work to DBS. We want to assign it to the correct teams that relating to what's work, so that we can get the right mix of skills necessary. And after a while, I started thinking about this. It took a little while, and it took a number of discussions. And finally, they came across this idea. Then, yes. Okay, we understand that, so long as we can see what happens, because there was the question within Jira, you can actually see what has moved into what column, or what has been where the process is now, when it's been completed or built. And they want to be able to track their project by what is being built and what is being sent back for, for redoing, bugs, that sort of thing. So what I did was I got them to use their own Jira board. That the project team didn't want to let go of their Jira board, which is fine. It's their Jira board, no worries. But I created one for the team and said, here you go, this is what's happening. But what about all the stuff that comes in before what we do? And I said to them, that's nothing to do with you. You're there to build what's needed to be built. You have discussions on what you're going to build next, but really you're looking and you've got the vision of the whole project going through. but your team is looking at what it's building next sprint, what's there. And it's that focus that makes a difference. And then we talked about the particular boards they have. They're so used to having boards that said something like ready to build or to do, in progress. I might have in tests, then they've got UAT, and then they've got accepted and done, and those sort of things all the way through. And I took a look at this and I said, well, here's a problem. You will never get anything to done. And the team sort of said, well, why not? And I said, you don't control all your columns. So what we needed to do was turn it back to what you needed to do. And the general argument that took teams a number of discussions to get around was that what happened if UAT fails? If they fail a user acceptance test and they have to do it again, how can it get back on there? And I explained it like this: UAT can never fail. There is not a single point in a UAT that will fail, even if it crashes everything and just black screen, nothing. It is not a failure. There are two things that come out of user acceptance testing. One is bugs, and the other is new stories. So UAT can never fail. Once they got that round their heads, that UAT can't fail, then it was a matter of saying, hey, actually that kind of works. Because what was happening is that there would be a story going in there saying, make a cup of coffee. So they'd make a cup of coffee and then come back to it and say, oh, it hasn't got milk in it. Oh, you didn't ask for that. Yes, I know, but it's UAT, it hasn't got milk. Okay, so we go and put milk in it, coming back, and they said, oh, no, it's not done. It's not done with the right type of milk. Oh, they redo it and bring it back again. Oh, no, the coffee beans aren't from the right place. Go away, come back in again. Says, I wanted a flat white, not a cappuccino. And so what actually happened was this one thing kept coming back and back and back. And it was an opportunity for the project people to be able to set it up exactly how they wanted it. So what this being able to control what columns are on there was really powerful for the teams. That meant that when it went away to UAT, and it often didn't go to UAT for a good 6 weeks, at user acceptance testing, new things came in, new stories, or bugs came in after that. And the big thing about it is they get prioritized normally. So something that might take previously get adjusted again and again and again is now subject to priority. Is this a bug needing to be done in the next sprint? The answer is obviously yes, in which case it is higher priority than that. Oh, no, not higher priority than this other thing we need to do. I suppose it can be put off till after that. Oh, is it higher priority to this? Oh, actually not really. So you're now starting to get things that would normally be forced to be done in a sprint are now being put off to sometimes never actually being done. Even a bug is a priority, needs to be prioritized. So teams are now starting to get things done. Suddenly productivity is shooting through the roof. They're getting somewhere, they're doing things, they're able to produce, there you go. Yes, occasionally a bug might actually leak through, but they had the testers in there, so that would be a problem with the testers. But it's still, when it comes down to it, something else might be found, it's there, which is normal. That's okay, but that bug is prioritized. So the situation was that the teams only held those things that it could control. So number 4 came. My lesson was, rather than talking to the Scrum Masters, I realized after a while that even though they had been trained, and some of them had Scrum Master certifications, and those other, some of them had even more certifications other than that, I realized after a while that really the only thing to do was to take over as a Scrum Master for at least a sprint. And I did that with one team. And I should have done that at the start just about, because all the pennies were starting to drop with people. Now I get it. Now I know what to do. I understand this. Now I know the Scrum Master's role in this. And I know the team's role in this. Now, I've done this many times, so it's all hat to me, but to a lot of people out there, it is something new. And remember, we're talking about a government department here where people don't move around. They've been in that department for a while, so they've never really been a Scrum Master before. They wouldn't know what to do. You can train them till the cows come home, but it's not until you actually show them sometimes that it happened. It's a very, very good way to impress upon people what happens. And I think that was the turnover point for a lot of the teams, because everybody was watching, Steve's in control there, let's see him trip up. And while I did, of course, they also saw benefits out of what was happening, and they all started to get behind this, which was very good. So number 5, the stand-up. I had a complaint that stand-ups were taking 40 minutes, and I was going to say, what? And you know, this was right from the start. I was going along because they all felt they were doing Agile because they were doing stand-ups. Now, I know Scrum calls them the daily Scrum, but this is Agile. So we're talking about stand-ups. And I use that term specifically because we weren't doing absolute strict Scrum. We were doing Agile in a Scrum type manner towards it. However, it was kind of fun to see what was happening and see what was there. And you'd go around there, and yes, the first thing I would hear, and I would sit in behind or stand behind a team doing a stand-up and listen. And, you know, invariably the Scrum Master says, oh, Steve, you got anything to add to our stand-up? And I'd say, I have no speaking rights. And shut up. That was kind of fun. But what I would see happening is everybody would come around, they start talking about the traffic on the way in and the reasons why somebody was a little bit late and what was happening. And then somebody would come out with a problem they were having. And then there was this great discussion on the problem that they were having. So what I did is I showed them. They had what they called a scrum of scrums, which was every Scrum Master came around once a week to a meeting that they had with the project teams, all of them together. And that was a way for project teams to ask questions and to see what all the other teams were doing. And the Scrum Masters were coming to me and saying, have you got any idea what we can do there? Because these are lasting 4 hours or more. And in the end, we all go away with no idea what's happening. And so I sat in on the first one, and there was great discussions on all the technical details of just about every story that they were doing that only related to that team. So I took over the next one, and I sent out this list of things. If you take a look and join me on LinkedIn, I've got a posting about how to do a stand-up, which might help. But I took a list of things. And I said I spoke, first of all, directly to the project teams. And I said, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to run this as a stand-up if I could, even though they're coming in on video because they're at a different location. I said, I'd like to run it as a stand-up. Here are the rules. And what I'd like you to do, please, is not have a say until afterwards. Once the stand-up is finished, I will say, that's the stand-up finished. That's it. Thank you very much. Now, is there anybody got any questions and other things that they want to bring up? That's the way to run this. It went from 4 hours to 20 minutes. Not only that, but the first time they ran it was when just about every Scrum Master came to me, and believe it or not, the project people as well, saying that's the first time they've run that meeting where they actually knew what all the other teams were doing. It was marvelous. Now, my rules were, first of all, we talk about not detail. This is not a technical meeting. This is a what am I supposed to be, how are we going towards our goal that we've set? What issues are there with the goals? How, what are we planning to do within this next week to go towards that goal? And if anybody brought up a single story, they would be cut off, because the other statement that I had is there are no discussions in a stand-up. That is it. So if somebody comes up and says, I've got a real problem, I can't do anything further because of such and such, then that is noted and we talk to them afterwards. But that's it. So it was actually quite good. It went from 4 hours, as I said, down to 20 minutes. So that was a way to do that. People often talk about how to do all the other things in an agile team, but few people actually relate how to do a proper stand-up. So that was quite interesting. Number 6. Yes, I love this. I love this. It wasn't until about, possibly 8-9 months after I started that I would get somebody sometime wander around to me and say, hey, Steve, I was sitting up last night and I was thinking about this, or I was reading about that. What do you think? Should we do this? And my response, and I'm very proud of myself that I didn't beat them over the head and say, what do you think I've been trying to tell you for the past 9 months? But my response was, oh, that sounds really cool. Why don't you give it a try and give a feedback on how it went? I'd love to hear it. What I really wanted to do was just bang their heads together, because it won't matter how many times I tell them. It only matters when they decide. That's where the learning comes in. So, that's it. Shut up and smile. Yes, it was all your idea. Wonderful. Wow, where did you hear that one? It was marvelous. That's what we're looking at. So here's the other thing that I came across is that, how do we change culture? And this is what Chris Buxton, the CDO, was into me about all the time. How are we changing the culture? And because he was getting excited, because he could now walk around that whole inner city office and see people doing agile things and see sticky notes on the screen and see Kanban boards and Scrum boards and things moving. And he could see at last the occasional one was even doing a burn down chart. And that blew him away. So he was very much into it. How are we doing with culture? And I said to him, there's only one way to change a culture. You might have different aspects to this out there, but to me, there's only one way, and that is constantly. Absolutely constantly. So in the local newsletter thing that we had online, I would be trying to post something little just about every day relating to Agile. Just some small quote or something that I come across or something that I'd read, and post something. So it's that constant change, constantly in front of them, that helps them do that. That psychological safety took a lot longer. Within a team, they started to get psychological safety, but they weren't too sure about relating that outwards as well. And it's that idea of, again, accepting failure. It wasn't until I started coming up with this wonderful quote that I remembered. The idea of fail fast, learn fast was something that I would never repeat in a new organization because it's so misunderstood. But I said to them, the thing about failing fast is it's like this quote. If you ever find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. And it's that sort of fail fast. Whoa, stop. What do we got? How do we learn something there? So we don't go down that track because we've started it. We just stop and work out. And as far as fail fast, learn fast is concerned, we do it all the time. It's like walking down the street. If we don't constantly adjust all the time, we're not doing it, we're not thinking it, it's all automatic. We don't constantly adjust, we'd end up walking straight into people or out in front of a bus or into a pole. We're continually failing fast, learning fast, adjusting our steps and carrying on. And that's the same with this, it's ability to fail fast. And I would relate quite often, areas of my failures, not as, hey, I'm terrible, but as a, hey, this is what I learned out of this. I don't know, you've got your own experiences, I would tell them. Where did you fail and learn? Would you have learned if you couldn't fail? And it's that idea and getting it through. And I am very, very firm believer, always have been a very firm believer, that nobody can learn anything new if they're doing everything right all the time. So it's only in our failures that we learn, not in our doing everything correctly. And it's quite a good one. When I first started out with my very first team as a programmer, my development manager took me aside and he said, Steve, if you're not doing a total stuff up at least once a month, if not once a week, then we need to have a talk. And I said, what? And he says, oh, if you're doing the same stuff up, that'll be a different talk. But I want you to make mistakes. I said, what do you mean? You actually want me to make mistakes? He says, yes, not deliberately, of course, but it tells me whether or not you're learning. If you're not stretching yourself, then it'll come out by the fact that you don't make any mistakes. So he says, his statement was that he didn't hire me for who I was. He hired me for who I was going to become. And if I didn't make mistakes, I wasn't going to become anything. And, there's always people in your life. You say, well, if I hadn't met that person, I wouldn't be who I was today. And that's very much like that. Being able to understand mistakes and work through it, the acceptance of it is a good one. That psychological safety within a team was a huge area that you're looking towards. And number 8, ownership. It's always somebody else's problem. It's something I simply failed to get across, is that change. It's not somebody else's problem. It's their problem. It's like, and I wrote something on LinkedIn about this a couple of years ago, and I must repost it, I must admit. It's the idea that, yes, it is the Scrum Master's role to resolve blockages and impediments, but they're still owned by the team. It's like saying you've got a leaky tap in your bathroom. You've called the plumber, it's now their problem. No, it's not. It's still your problem. It's in your bathroom. If there's something happening where the plumber just doesn't make it that day, what's going to happen? Your tap is still going to leak. It's your tap. And this is something that I had real problems with trying to get across to everybody. They're always saying, oh, it's not my problem. Or, or blaming it's somebody else's problem. No, it's not. If it's affecting you, it's your problem. If somebody else not doing something is affecting you, it's still your problem because it's affecting you. What are you going to do about it? And it's that idea that I couldn't get. But in the end, I took a look at what's happening there. After a couple of years, I felt that they needed somebody different to take them to their next level, if you like, because I'd done what I could. And I went away very, very pleased with that. But what really made a difference? What actually did make a difference? Well, the first one is training. I can't emphasize that. I own a company that does training, and I'm not trying to sell the training. I'm doing that because I own a company that does training, and that's why I know it's so effective. It is very effective. It doesn't matter. People will, if they're not speaking the same language, if they're not on the same page, if you say sprint and they're thinking something different, or if you say stand up and they're thinking something different, it won't work. Get everybody on the same page. That was the big step that said to people, we need to change, is that training. The next one is teams. And I know that's been talked about, long-lived teams all the way through from a lot of people. There's a lot of books written about it, there's a lot of articles, a lot of discussions, but it's true. It is that the teams don't belong to a project. The project gives work to the teams. There is a difference. The team is then able to organize the work around how they are best to deliver it, and they're the best ones to do that. Drop the decision making to the lowest possible point. Sometimes that's the CEO, sometimes it's the person doing the actual work. So if the person doing the work can make the decisions on how they're going to do the work, they're the ones that are doing it. They'll know best. We hired them because of their skill. We trained them to be what the best they could. So allow them to make the decisions. Teams control only what they can control. That's another one that made a huge difference. It's very difficult for a team to see everything going through the different on a Kanban board or a Scrum board, whichever work they're doing, and get to one particular column and nothing ever going across, nothing ever burned down. In fact, their lines that they have, their burn down lines would either flatline or it might go up with new things being put in. And that's it. So control their work and only what they can control. And if they don't control it, it's none of their business. So, get out of it. Only control what they can control. And they can't control user acceptance testing. So that's it. Ongoing coaching, a big one. There's a saying in New Zealand, New Zealand's got the All Blacks, the world's greatest ever rugby team. Absolutely, hands down, world's greatest rugby team. But even the All Blacks have coaches. And that's the idea that you're looking at. You don't necessarily need a full-time employed coach on there because they'd be twiddling their thumbs most of the time. What you need is somebody who can come in often, be available to answer questions, be able to drop something and come on in and see a team when they're having difficulties, be there to be seen a few times, perhaps even a couple of days a week, but certainly have a coach. It's that coach that will keep it in, because if it's not, even if the team are the most brilliant, agile teams you've ever come across, they will eventually work back into their safety areas if they don't have an agile team asking questions, an agile coach, sorry, asking questions. And sometimes those questions are difficult to answer and challenging. And that's what I love about it. It's really like that, very difficult to challenge. So where does that leave us? And where I left them is, yes, the teams weren't there yet, but they were certainly, umpteen times better than more productive and enjoying life, a lot better than when I first arrived. It was an amazing transformation. Looking back on it, though, they would have said, well, we didn't transform at all. And that's the best type of transformation. That is marvelous. I love to hear that, because I know, looking at them, that all the transformation they've gone through, but they feel they've just done the best things all the time, which is good. They've come a huge, long way. And, I took away a lot of friends. They're tremendous people, and I love it, absolutely tremendous. Now, what I had to look at all the way through, as far as I was concerned, because this is one of the biggest learning trips that I have ever been on, suddenly dumped into this sort of situation, was, first of all, I took a look at that Gartner's hype cycle. That's supposed to be for the introduction of new fancy hardware. But I looked at that as my coaching idea. I had this, Peacocke inflated expectations. This is what's going to happen. This is what's going to, and then this sort of trough of disillusionment. Nobody wants to listen to you. It's a sort of, hey, nobody will talk to you type of thing. They actively avoid you. That's that trough of disillusionment. And it's not till afterwards that you're around there for a little while that you're not going to change their lives and change all their titles and everything else. You're there to be the person who they can bounce ideas off, even if they don't put those ideas into actions. That's it. That slope of enlightenment happens, and you've got that plateau of productivity. which is well above the previous area. And that's what I took a look at, that whole idea. I had one constant go-to quote that I had to keep looking at all the time. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. So I wasn't myself necessarily going to accept that I wasn't going to be able to do something. So if that didn't work, what else might work? What else should I be doing? Is there another way? And it's that constant re-looking at what I'm doing and how I can change that helped me all the way through. It's a constant change. So yeah, that's really it. So as far as I'm concerned, I loved it. I learned an awful lot. I went from many years of being a person in charge of many people and being able to make a change within different organizations and both government and in private sectors, and loving what I do all the time, but always coming in a position of power to suddenly coming in a position of no power, and to learn immediately the power of influence and to try and work out what that actually meant in my own idea. That's my learnings all the way through. So, so there's where I am. I hope you enjoyed it, listening to all my failures and all the stuff ups that I had, but I learned it and I loved it. It's a fantastic thing to be a privilege to be an agile coach to a number of teams. I ended up, by the way, coaching the rest of the organization as well. You know, their HR department, which turned out to be people and culture. I can't remember what it is now, because I didn't like the word human resources. So they changed that. They ended up being one of the most agile groups in the whole organization, where they only wanted to find out what this agile was because they're now starting to hire agile people. So so they loved it as well. There's different areas within there. The only area that I could not get into was the executive management, because they felt it was nothing to do with them and they're too busy anyway. But I gather since then, there's been some openness towards agile also means to them as well. So so it's a lot of fun. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for this. We're opening up for questions. Is there anything anybody wants to ask on that? I'd love to see your faces. There's quite a lot of fun at the moment. I'm doing a lot of training to and helping people from where I am here in Wellington, New Zealand. And I was just saying to people at the Agile Expert Club there, in 2019, I spent 92 days sitting in an airplane. And then the end of February, I desperately made my 50-hour trip to get home again before everything closed up. And I haven't been near an airport ever since. So it's quite good. So thank you, everybody. I'd love to see your faces. And that was wonderful. Any further questions?
Yes.
My name is Brian. Unfortunately, I cannot get my camera to come on for some reason, but I was wondering, when you went through the exercise at that point in time, and as you said, you've continued to do coaching. So I work in a relatively large organization and I coach currently 3 teams, but I've kind of been with them for a little while. And have you been through a couple iterations of 2 parts, I guess? One would be, looking back, as you continued to learn since that time, would you have done things differently that you did at that point in time? And then how did you reach the point where you felt it was you were more comfortable and you needed to move on and let somebody else come in to work with them?
Yeah, right. I think it's because I had 9 DevOps teams and I was the only one there. I don't think I would do that again. I would demand at least somebody else into assist. Well, I was learning all the way through. Don't get me wrong. I don't come along with all this great, wonderful power. I've got a lot of experience, but not this wonderful knowledge that I gained out of there. And every day was doing something new. That go-to quote helped me a lot by saying, is there another way? And that's just a matter of saying, there are times, and I explained this one time to somebody else, there are times when you have to go down into the car park underneath the building, find a secluded area, bash your head against the wall several times till the pain stops, and then go back up with another smile on your face. It's really difficult at times, but gosh, when something happens, that's when you say, wow, that was quite good. So yeah, what would I have done differently? I'm not sure I would have taken that on my own at the start. It would have needed a couple of us.
9 teams is a lot.
Yeah, it is. In the end, I worked in with those people who were trained up and eager to become, as their next step, a coach. So I started to use others. Yeah. I hope that helps. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and then I guess the latter part was after you had worked with them for a while, were there key things that let you know it was time for you to move on and maybe go work with some other teams? Because I've worked with some of the teams that I've worked with for a little while. One of them's relatively new, but some of the others. And at times, because it is ebbs and flows, I wonder, maybe is it time for me to move on and let somebody else come in? And because while, as you said, you can't get somebody to change to be somewhere they don't want to be, but maybe you've done what you can do and then somebody else can come in to build upon it. And so it's just kind of something that I wonder about at times.
Yeah, I know what you mean. To me, it's the point where the teams become high-performing teams. And that is where you go in one day and you realize that you're thinking of introducing this and introducing that, and you go in and you find they've already had a meeting about it and a talk about it and discussion, and say they're starting to implement it. They're well ahead of where you are. They may not be where you want them to go, but it's not about you. It's about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing that I've at times struggle with the most. You're not doing these things for me. Don't report out to me. Many a times, as you're saying in the stand-up, it's like, don't talk to me. I don't even need to be here. You guys are talking to each other. You're figuring out what you guys as a team are going to do.
Oh, absolutely. It's the difficulty of you're not doing what I want you to decide to do. You're doing something different. And it's sort of, okay, well, shut up. Let's see how it works out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I decided at that point, when it got to that stage where the teams were starting to get into high-powered teams, really just getting there where perhaps they needed something on a different level. And I came in, as you know, my background's management area and reasonably high-level management. So I felt that to come in as a coach, it really probably needed somebody on more a scrum master that's going into their agile coaching relationship, or at least 2 or 3 of them. So I moved on. Besides, my company was starting to take off as well. Other people wanted training, and it was time for me to move into full-time my own company.
Hope it continues to go well. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I had a question that come here. As a Scrum Master to a very senior team, which is moving towards Agile transformation, Jenny, what would be an ideal approach? It's the same with anything. Your ideal approach is not to tell the team what to do. Your ideal approach is to ask the right questions, the sticky question. So how do you think that would work? What would happen if you did that? That type of questioning coming through. And even if the answers aren't what you were expecting or aren't even what you want them to be, let them do that. See what happens. And talk to them. How did that work out? What happened there? What could you have changed? All the way through. So it's the same approach that you would take, whether it's a senior team or a junior team or a senior agile, a very experienced agile team or not. The coaching side of things is not about telling people what to do. That's the training. The Agile team is about asking people what they're going to do. Agile approach. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, how to improve on the team performance, because many times the team feels pressurized while working, and continuous work, they gets bored of the routine work. So how to keep the team health motivated, how the even at the individual also keep them energetic, enthusiastic while working. Yeah, like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the nickname of Smiley, I think. It's just a matter of, I enjoy that teamwork. I enjoy seeing people there. So it's always inspiring. It's always there. And that's that one that I went to there on that last one, is how do you change culture? It is constantly. So constantly putting up things, constantly opening up discussions with them. What do you think of this? What would be that better? And I would be relating to mainly to the Scrum Masters, not necessarily to the teams, because I wanted the Scrum Master to step up. I wanted the Scrum Master to be the coach to their teams. And it was saying to the Scrum Masters, why don't you put that to the team? Oh, no, the team would never work. Well, why don't you give the team a chance to decide whether or not they want it? And if it's the wrong thing, put something else up. Challenge the team with a question. And you do that in your retrospectives. Or you might just sit down to the team saying, hey, last night I thought of this. What do you think, team? So it's that idea.
Can you give a few examples of the questions regarding how to challenge the team? What kind of questions we need to ask in order to motivate the team?
Yeah. So that one I talked about with user acceptance testing. The teams were saying, but we must, because we've then got to, it must go into another column because we've then got to upload it to the server once it's been user acceptance tested. So therefore the stories still stay active. And my question was, oh, why? And then I have to explain, well, because, we don't know what to upload. Why? And it's that sort of 5 whys to challenge them. And it started to get a bit awkward for them. And I can see them shifting in their seats when they do that. But it's that sort of why it relates to it. And they started getting down to the fact of, oh, actually, really, we don't need to. Really, if it's past UAT, then we just simply put in, and I said, but they still have to upload it. And I said, great. Is there any reason why you can't write a story that says, as a customer, I want new changes uploaded that have been accepted by the users so that I can now use these new changes? That's sort of an idea. So why doesn't that come in as a new story rather than the build story for each little technical change that you've made to go up there? I suppose we could do that. What do you think? I said, so how would that work for you? What would you like to do? Is there a better way of doing this? And once they started thinking on it, because people do things because it's their habit to do things. And an agile coach questions that habit and it comes into it. So it's a matter of questioning it. That's one of the areas. The other areas, of course, is things like, our stories can't be chopped down, because I said to them, a story is no good if it goes over 2 days. I said, chop it down to underneath 2 days. Oh, we can't. And they're all going to be the same. We're going to do the same thing for each task that we've got. So it can't be sliced up any further. Why? Oh, because we have to do it this way. So what's the difference between that story then and this one over here? Because you're doing them both and they both got the same story. Oh, this one's got such and such relates to that. Can that be chopped down? Oh, I suppose we can do it there. It's that sort of challenging situation. And sometimes I felt like I was trying to be the dumbest person they've ever come across, because I was asking all these questions, and that helped the team to understand. And while you come across as a real dumb person while you're talking to them, afterwards, and it might take a week or two, they would come to you and say, that was really tricky. You know, I like that. It's really good. They get into that with you. I've got a friend who's a very, very good coach. I hold him up to far higher standards than I've got. He's tremendous, been doing it for many years. And I'm almost terrified to tell them about a book I read on the weekend, because his question is, what are you going to change in your life now that you've read that book? What effect has it done to you? So it's that type of questioning all the time, but of course in a good way, in a happy way, and in a way that sort of gets an answer rather than a way that makes them too uncomfortable, if you like. That would be your way, not mine. But yeah, cool. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah.
No worries. Anybody else?
Yeah, Steve, this is Keith.
G'day,
Quick
Keith.
question. What are your thoughts about doing like Scrum games? Do you think they are helpful?
They can be helpful to get across an idea for a team who really doesn't get it. But I actually don't do games too much. I'm not really into games. I hate games, but that's only because of my own personality. I will do them if I've been asked. And it's quite a lot of times, some of the teams do a sort of, let's go around to the main open area and do this game, and they call me over to do it. And I do it, and I have as much fun as everybody else doing it. But to me, I'm related to, what does it mean to them actually doing the work? What do they need to learn? What do they need to be challenged with? But so, yeah, I'm open to it. If that's your thing, wear it. Marvelous. Yeah, because it works. It really does work. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else?
Yes, Steve. What are the KPIs for measuring the customer happiness or the customer satisfaction?
That's an interesting one. And I actually created one of those as I went around. And what I did was every 6 months or so, I'd send out this questionnaire, all online. And I'd have something like, little things like, do you feel like you can bring up an issue in a meeting? And I would have 1 to 5, 1 being definitely not, and 5 being absolutely yes, anytime without a problem. Now, I learned very quickly the first time I did that, and it was that you never do it as a 1 to 5, because everybody would answer 3, which is in the middle. You do it 1 to 4. They have to choose one or the other. And okay, so that's being me sneaky, but it works. And the first time they do that, they would answer how they think you want the answer to be. So don't take too much faith in the answers. And after a while, it comes right. With 9 teams in that area, I was able to do that because what I did was I made it absolutely anonymous. I couldn't tell not only who did it, but even what team they're in, or even what office they're in, what city they were in. I couldn't tell. I could only tell that there were so many people who answered. And it was difficult because I only got about 30% of the people answering the first time I did it. But by the 3rd time, most of them were starting to answer, which is kind of good. And the result is not what the answers were. The result always is, hey, Scrum Master, here are the results. Why don't you talk to that with your team in there? And remember, if they all answered, if the result was, 60% of the people answered, no, I don't like this way of doing things, then it might be, relate to your team, it might be 6% from other teams, but your team is good. And approach things always that way. And approach things with a, what do you think? Is there anything we need to change because of this? And sometimes things would come out of that discussion. It's the discussions that Scrum Masters have with the teams, not the result of it. And you've got to also have that discussion with your management to ensure that the management can't take anything out of that the wrong way either, because this is not about answers. It's about the discussions you have afterwards. So there are already those. I had something like 30 odd questions around that. You know, how safe do I feel? How you know, do I feel confident in my team's abilities to deliver? You know, all those sort of things that are there. Do I enjoy working with my team? And it goes around all the way through. Do I put input into or ideas up to my team? All the way through. I've got a whole pile of those. Yes.
So only product owner it was involved, or any other stakeholders were involved? I mean, to measure the success or happiness from the customer end.
It's an interesting thought, but I don't generally do that. I sit and talk to the customers rather than send out those, you know, what was it, those questions and answers. So that tells me whether or not the customers are happy. And in this particular government organisations, of course, the stakeholders are those. I can't talk to every person in New Zealand, which are the customer. I talk to the stakeholders, which are the project teams, the product managers, all those sort of people. And they can sometimes talk to me better than they can talk to their teams, which is a very telling situation at some stages. And it told me of difficulties they were having. Now, I saw that change over the 2 years that I was there. But the fact that they would tell me something that they may not tell the teams showed me another area that I might need to look into. But no, I wouldn't send them a question and answer. No, I'd talk directly. I must admit, I never even thought of sending them a question and answer. What would you send them? Don't know. You know, how likely are you to recommend this team? Doesn't really come into it. I hope that answered.
Yes, so only you were involved in such kind of discussion and not the entire team, right? As far as I understand.
2 or 3 ways. Firstly, yes, I was involved, but I might also have this discussion with several of them. You know, I might actually, although I didn't, but I should have had a thought of it after that sort of Scrum of Scrums stand-up meeting. I might have said, can everybody stand behind? Because I got a question of how well this is going. You know, where do we need changing? Actually, I do remember one time I did that. And, you know, what other areas? So I turned that after the stand-up, after the Scrum of Scrums, I turned that into a retrospective, if you like, as if we were all one team.
Yeah, okay. So you kept such kind of discussion as a secret, I will say, and just you asked the questions to the team from improvement perspective.
Yeah.
So this is how you brought the change. Okay, okay. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, that's sort of an idea. Okay, so we've still got a bit of time. Does anybody else quickly want a question or a comment?
Hey, Steve, another question kind of following up on that and related to earlier when you said that they were getting to be high-performing teams would be, as they were, a common term that can be used is maturity. I know there's pros and cons to using that word when talking about a team. But when you are working with the teams, obviously you were coaching them in a direction. But you would ask them in the survey and collect feedback for how they thought things were going. Did you at other times, not in the survey, discuss with them? I know you said that, you know, they might think that you're, you know, not the brightest person there, always with the whys and trying, but you were trying to get them to go in a direction. Were there times beyond when you actually coached them in the initial Agile classes where you would talk with some of them about where they would maybe be trying to go? So you, like an elongated portion of the coaching versus sitting down and saying, here's what a certified Scrum team would do, and here are the roles, and here are the ceremonies. And beyond that, was there ongoing coaching that you were doing with them?
Brian, all the time, all the
Okay.
time. And in fact, actually, one of the comments that I got was from I used to my desk was next to a project manager's desk, and that was the old style project manager person. And they were complaining all the time. And in fact, I think they actually ended up complaining to the CIO that I was never at my desk, to which she was told that was my job. That if I was at my desk, I wouldn't be doing my job. So a lot of people have trouble understanding what a coach does. And that's, as a coach, I don't do any work. On the other hand, I'm working all the day. I'd get at 7 o'clock and I'd leave fairly late. But yes, it is. It is a matter of sitting down and discussing. I would see something happening. I might wander past a team doing a stand-up and sit at the back and listen to it for a little while. And then, you know, that almost Scrum Masters knew what was happening whenever I said, want a cup of coffee? Because mostly the coffee, quite a few times, a coffee was a cup of coffee and catch up. Other times, a cup of coffee meant, he's going to have to talk to me about something. I wonder what that is now. So yes, there would be. As a coach, you're also a leaning board. You're an ideas bouncer. And I would never tell them what to do. Or if I found myself doing it, I'd turn that into a question.
Okay, that's where I was kind of going with it. Was it that you would just outright tell them, hey, maybe we should consider this? Or was it more trying to help them with the self-realization? And then, as you said, when they would hit it on the right spot, then you'd say, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you give it a try? So it's not that you would outright tell them typically, you would just try to kind of steer them there and hope they figure it out.
Oh, Brian, there's both, actually, I think.
Okay.
There would be times when they would ask me a direct question. And my answer, I learned over time. You know, at the start, I'd answer directly. And later on, once I learned how to think, because this is my learning journey as well, and I'd learned to answer those sort of questions with, well, some teams do this. And, you know, things like, well, in Kanban, you do that, but in Scrum, you do this. What would be best for your team? One of the big things I'd also do is I'd have the Agile Manifesto, and I printed that up on a single big A3 piece of paper and plastered it everywhere. And sometimes I would have a conversation, and, you know, I remember distinctly, like somebody would come around to us and one of the programmers and say, they're writing the stories all wrong. What should I do? And I would say, well, let's see what the Agile Manifesto says. And we'd walk up to the wall, read it down, and say, it doesn't mention stories. Therefore, it's a tool. How best, we need to talk to your team about how the best way your team should be writing stories in order to be productive and do the right things, rather than what's right or what's wrong. Because as a tool we can use as we need to. So yeah, that was a big one as well.